We have perverted the Commerce Clause, the Supremacy Clause, and the General Welfare Clause so much that people don't even know what we have anymore. And that was not the intent of the founders who wrote the Constitution. We have to get back to that basic. All right? If you think, real quick, of a picture of an eagle, and this is what I like to say. Actually, I don't know how many people have read The 5,000-Year Leap, but I use their depiction here, okay? They have a three-headed eagle, and the three heads is the executive, the Supreme Court, and the Congress, with both eyes being the House and the Senate, okay? But you have two wings. And for a bird to fly right, okay, the two wings represent the problem solving. How do we solve people that are out of work? How do we solve, this many people that are having problems? How do we solve this? How do we solve that? Okay? But the other side is the constrictor, okay, which says, is it good for the country? Is it constitutional? And can we pay for it? If those three things can't get answered, then this program shouldn't be at the federal level. Okay? Now, that gives power back to the states. All right? And of course, now because we have a better tax system, we have more money at the state. So we can, if the state wants to fund, it has the right to do those entitlements. But that's up to you,
So do you see sunsetting things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid?
Absolutely, we have to. First of all, we know there's no money in Social Security. It's got to be the biggest Ponzi scheme ever developed. Same thing with Medicaid, Medicare. But again, it wasn't started yesterday. It's not going to be fixed tomorrow. There's some grandfathering that has to go on. But what we have to do is get to the point that turning it back to the states. Okay, you've got the money now. You start figuring out if these programs can fit within your budget. Okay, but we can't keep. I'd love to be able to get my Social Security. I think it's absolutely wrong on Mr. Ryan's plan to raise Social Security to 70 years old. Wait a minute, I paid a lot of money into that. I want it now. Okay, I mean, I'm 2 years away from 55. I want it now. 55 was the year when it first started out. But, we don't have it. So I'm going to have to be realistic here. So don't keep taking it out of my check. But we have to get to that point. We just, again, the winning says we can't afford it. And so we've got to look at another solution here. And the solution is, let's see what the states can do. And, that's where strong state government's going to have to come in and either develop programs to put people to work, develop programs to get jobs in here, because by then the federal government won't have so many regulations, right? Because we're going to come in and we're going to get rid of NAFTA and get back to a fair trade system so that we get companies actually coming to work here. But the states now don't have their federal restrictions on them, so they can start getting and competing for companies to come here. Are some states going to be better than others? Sure, absolutely. That's just the way it is, but that's competition, right? And competition is a good thing because eventually, maybe, hopefully, all the states will come together and we'll be one producing nation. But we've got to get the states to go back to it, and we're broke. And to keep borrowing money to pay for this, I don't know about you, but I'm a little bit too old to learn Chinese. Okay, and that's what it's going to come to. All right, if we don't get rid of this, they're going to come calling. I know how debt collectors work, and if you don't pay up, they take. Well, they need labor, they need resources. Does that answer that?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Who's next?
And I'm not picking on China, just that they own our debt. I mean, I mean, if it was Russia or somebody else, I would say the exact same thing, but.
I think Japan actually holds more of our debt even than China does.
Does it?
Yeah.
I thought they sold a bunch to China,
Japan, well, they may have, but the
I know
last
they
time I
own real
heard, it was
estate.
Japan first, China second, and ourselves third.
Okay.
So, and we are monetizing our debt, as most of the people in this room know, so.
Yeah, they're already collecting, and we're not able to pay up. I mean, you know, we have become a nation of deadbeats as far as the world's concerned, and that's not good. You know, they will come and take one way or the other.
You want to abolish certain amendments to the Constitution. How do you propose doing that?
Well, again, it is a process. I am not going to say that I'm going in there and we're going to rip the 16th out. It's not how it's
Review the
done.
process for
It's a due process. We have to convince 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, and
two sessions or
two, I think 2/3 of the 50 states have to go through to, I'm not quite sure on that number, but it's a selling job. And you know, you're going to have to sell, you're going to have to get people, and you're going to have to convince the House, you're going to have to convince the Senate, and then you're going to have to take it to each state. And it's not going to be an easy, but it is a due process of law that can happen. Now, you know, I think there's been 30 such attempts to amend, to put through amendments to the Constitution in the last 20 years. No, let's go back, I would say 40, let's say 50 years. And only a few of them have been successful, like the 18-year voting age and things of that nature. So there's a lot on the table. But they couldn't sell it right. They didn't have the support. They didn't get the support of the constituents. They didn't get the support of the state. And if we can get back to a true sense of balanced power, where you can convince the U.S., the Senate working with the state, and you can convince them, and you convince the House, then yes, you can start getting these amendments and abolishments through. It can be done. It's not easy, but anybody that tells you that they're going to go in there and just rip it right out, well, pretty naive, I think. And I would not elect that person.
Right now, probably two most urgent things is this healthcare that's looming over our heads and the problem with all the spending. So what kind of process would you consider to
Well, again, we have to go through and repeal it. The Obamacare is going to bankrupt this nation and send us into overdrive inflation. So we have to repeal it, but it's the same process. Again, you just can't, unless we want to break down the rules of law and go and actually, take over the Capitol in a mad democracy march, then we have to follow the rules of law. And by following that, again, we have to convince the House, we have to convince the Senate, we've got to convince the states. Now the states, again, if we can get the senators back to the states, they can work on the nullification side. They can tell the federal government, I'm not going to follow that rule. And what's the federal government going to do? Okay? Nothing. Nothing. So we have to get to a point that the U.S. senators are working to what the states want. And if the state does not want Obamacare, then they have to go to work in Washington to get other states to go along with it. But we do have to follow due process. Okay, it's not a matter of us taking the government over by storm. Some of we can, but then what do we have? So, but that's it's going to be up to you and you and you and you. I mean, who you elect in your state is going to play a big role in this, because that's who your U.S. senators are going to work for. Isn't that right? That's right. So.